I'm Adam.
And I'm Kara.
Welcome to Crunchy Cozy Games. Today, we are talking about the Crunchy Games.
Last time we talked about cozy games, and so that was my turn. And now it's your turn to talk about all of the crunchiest of the crunchy games.
Yes, I think it's important. We talked about kind of what distinguishes a cozy game. I think it's also important to distinguish what makes a crunchy game.
Sure.
So for me, I think a lot of people would refer to a crunchy game as something that takes a long time. And I don't think that's always what it is. Although I do think a lot of crunchy games do tend to take a lot longer. For me, what makes up a crunchy game is the variety of options that you have on your turn and what you might get from it. And so I think what a lot of people refer to as analysis paralysis, these games are really susceptible to that, but it's because you're trying to maximize the best that you can.
Absolutely. And I also think that, you know, for me, a crunchy game is not about length. It's not about, it's not necessarily about how like difficult of a decision difficult it is to make a decision on your turn, but I think it's also the combination of like multiple different mechanisms happening at the same time. I think that very few crunchy games have a single mechanism that's happening and a single thing that's going on. I think that crunchy games require you to manage a lot of things, and a lot of different components, points, resources, you know, whatever. You're not just going to be focusing on one thing during the game. And so for me, I think that, you know, it can be a quick game and still be really crunchy if there's a lot that's happening, whether it's in your turn or in the round. Yeah,
I think that makes sense. So let's kick off the list with our number 10 selection here. Paladins of the West Kingdom.
Ooh, Paladins.
So if you watched our series of videos, the top 100 games of all time.
That we played last
year. You'll know that I was a big fan of Architects of the West Kingdom.
Or at least a bigger fan than me. It was still on my list.
It was still pretty high in your list, too. Mine was in the top 10. I was a huge fan of it. I really fell in love with it once I played it.
Absolutely.
We played Paladins for the very first time this year, and I think I might like it just a little bit more.
Really?
The reason for that is Paladins has that extra layer of crunch, which I just like a lot.
Okay.
So the thing about Paladins is it's a worker placement game, just like Architects.
Yes.
But the twist with this one is you have a bunch of different workers. You've got green workers, which are kind of your farmers or your groundspeople. You've got red workers, which are essentially your soldiers. You've got black workers, which are your monks. You've got blue workers. You've got white workers, which are just your generics.
And the purple ones.
And then you've got the purple ones, the thieves, which can be any of those roles.
Yes.
The reason this is important is because a lot of the actions that you can take to move yourself up the three different tracks that you have, which is influence and faith and strength, relies on those different color workers. So when you start the game, each of those main actions requires three different workers to be placed there. As you progress throughout the game, you might use green workers to start occupying some of those spaces, which then...
And those are permanent.
Right.
Green. They're not workers. They're something else.
Right.
They're like some sort of...
they're like
house.
houses. They cover the space on your board.
Right.
But that makes those actions easier to do. So it's really simple to specialize in a specific area. Like you can specialize in war, you can specialize in fortifications, you can specialize in faith and send your monks out to influence the rest of the country. Each round of this game, and there's 7, you're going to pick one of your paladins, which gives you a certain number of workers, and then you're going to draw one of the cards out of a shop that also has a set number of workers. And then from that pool, you're going to decide what actions you can take. Now, the reason this is crunchy is because every action that you take is going to build up one of those 3 different scoring tracks. So as I mentioned, you can specialize in one particular scoring track and really rely on those types of things, or you can kind of try to be a jack of all trades and try to bring them up equally. What's really difficult about that is it means you're always going to be paying more workers, and so you're probably not going to get as many turns as your opponents.
Yeah, I will say I found this one, at least on our first playthrough, kind of hard to manage.
Yeah.
Like even just listening to you explain it again, my mind is spinning, and I find like it. I agree with you 100% that it belongs on our most crunchy list. Just because there is a lot going on, and it's really easy to lose track of any of those abilities that are happening. I know at one point I completely forgot that the paladins that you choose give you bonuses on the tracks to help you like build other things. I was foregoing taking certain actions because I didn't think I had enough influence or strength or whatever, because I forgot that I was getting a bonus.
Right.
So I think it is one that is incredibly easy to miss things. But when you are able to put it all together, I can see how it's so satisfying. And I'm excited to play it again. I mean, I really enjoyed Architects of the West Kingdom. I really think that Paladins of the West Kingdom is a good successor to it. And I'm also excited to try Viscounts.
Yes. Next on our list.
Yeah. So yeah, I think I agree with you about the crunch.
Perfect. Well, let's move on then.
All right.
So our number 9 then, Great Western Trail. This one is Great Western Trail, Argentina, but they're all in a similar place, whether you get the new edition of Great Western Trail, which is set in the Wild West, or you get the new one that's New Zealand, although they do replace all the cows with sheep.
Ooh,
which is very cute. So this one, just like you were talking about with Paladins, where there's a lot to manage, this one has a lot of different mechanisms that are working in it.
It does.
You've got one part deck builder, where you're managing your hand of cattle, which the cattle all have a numerical value. And so the higher numerical value of each cattle card, the more you're going to get when you sell them.
Right, unless you have duplicates.
Unless you have duplicates. That's one of the added areas of crunch. So basically the game, you are moving around the board and you're stopping at different locations, getting bonuses, taking actions, maybe putting one of your own buildings on that spot.
Locations.
You also have to pay tolls for any time you pass through an area that you're not stopping at, which is great for some players because they can make a lot of money. Right.
You can pass through your own for free.
And then if it does belong to you, other players are going to have to stop and give you money for those areas.
Absolutely.
In Argentina, you're working to get to Buenos Aires, where you're going to take your cattle, you're going to ship them off somewhere else. What Kara was talking about, though, as far as the duplicates go, is that when you get to sell, you take the cards that are in your hand, of which you can only draw a certain number, and if you have any duplicates, they basically cancel each other out. So if you have 3 4s in your hand, you get one. You get 1 4, but that's it. So even if you had a great hand with a numerical value of 12, it's only going to count for the 1 4.
Right.
So you're really trying to manage your deck and where things go, as well as managing the rest of the board and where your locations are.
Well, and in addition to this like main track that you're talking about, there's also the train.
Yes.
That is kind of around like the top edge of the board, I would say. And that's something that you don't have to do. You don't have to do a lot with the train.
Right.
But if you forget about it, I mean, you're missing out on potentially a lot of points. I mean, it is a I mean, that's what won me the game.
Right.
When we
There's
played.
tons of points that are available through the train, extra bonus actions that you can get through that. The other thing that's great about it is the further the train goes on that path, the quicker you can exit the trail and get to Buenos Aires.
Right, you can take a shortcut on your train and potentially bypass some
a lot of tolls.
Tolls for other people's locations.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is fantastic. I mean,
it is.
And that's one of those things about the crunch is that sometimes you want to take the longer road because it means you're going to have more chances to change out the cards that are in your hand.
Yeah.
And that's really where that crunchiness of this game comes in, because otherwise it's just kind of a peaceful racing game in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I found this one I know we talked about how like stress level doesn't necessarily determine crunch level, right? I found this one less stressful than Paladins.
Yeah, I believe that.
Yeah, I think, overall enjoyment of the game, I liked Great Western Trail better than Paladins.
Also, the other thing about this game that has nothing to do with crunch, but I just really like a lot, is your meeple is not the color of what team you're playing for. Instead, you put a tiny little cowboy hat on them.
It's true.
And it's adorable. And it should absolutely be added to our list of great aesthetic things that we like in games.
Awesome components.
Yes, exactly. So that is number 9, Great Western Trail.
Argentina.
Yeah, exactly. I thought I forgot words there, but I did forget.
You did. You forgot the qualifier.
Yes. All right. Number 8. Oh man, this one just sounds crunchy bringing it out.
It's got the shake of all the pieces.
Terraforming Mars. This is another game that I really adore. Mm-hmm. It is one that can be quite a table hog.
It's massive.
Yeah. Well, the board itself, not so bad. But what actually takes up a lot of space is that as you're playing the game, you're going to start playing cards as part of your actions. Mm-hmm. Those cards, you can have multiple columns and rows of cards that go as you're playing.
Yes.
This game is really kind of an economic Euro game. I mean, you are increasing numbers, using those increased numbers to purchase more things, to make more numbers go up.
I mean, when you break it down to its components,
And,
absolutely.
the thing that I think all board gamers really love is watching numbers go up.
It is very, very satisfying.
This one's really fun because you have multiple types of income. I mean, you've got your regular money, but then you also have food resources. You also have titanium and iron resources that you're getting. You've got the green leaf, which I think, is that oxygen or is that, it might be plants?
I know that there's an oxygen scale.
Yeah. And then you've got energy, and then you've got heat.
Yeah.
And every round, some of those resources convert. Like your energy converts to heat, and so on and so forth. Now, depending on how much of those resources you have, you're going to be able to play cards that you've taken into your hand. Those cards range from everything from algae to the mafia. And that's not a joke. Those are really cards that are in the game. And each of those cards tends to give you some sort of bonus.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those games, kind of like what you were talking about Paladins, where you are managing not just your actions, but you're also managing what you have on the board.
Yeah. I also think that this one, the like resource management part of it, I think really contributes to the enjoyment of this. Like knowing that you have a stock or that you're doing really well in one specific type of currency can really help you to focus where you're going to take those actions.
Right.
I really love like the tile placement aspect of this and deciding where to build, where to terraform, whether it's forest or water or whatever. I think it's a very satisfying experience.
Yeah, it is. And that's the other aspect of it, is that as you go, you're also placing tiles, whether that is forest or cities or water. You are actively building on a shared map. So everybody is doing the same thing, and you're trying to increase the heat on the planet, you're trying to increase the oxygen on the planet, and then you're also trying to add water.
And of course, as far as theming goes, you're sharing the map because you are competing corporations that are trying to develop the planet and battling for control of it in the end once it's done. As we've talked about, I don't particularly find the theme of this very interesting.
Yeah. The generic art on the cards probably doesn't help.
Oh my gosh, it's like stock images of stuff, like the like bacteria card. Like it's, if you Google bacteria, like you're gonna find probably one of these images. It's just like so generic.
How fun is it though, Kara, when you've got your like set of plants that you've now put on Mars, and then you also get tiny adorable dogs.
Okay, that's fair. Some of them are more satisfying than others.
Every planet needs tiny adorable dogs.
True.
But yeah, that's my number 8, Terraforming Mars. Okay, a game that is very similar to Terraforming Mars, but has a cozier theme, I think is actually more crunchy, and that is Ark Nova.
when you say very similar,
Yeah.
what do you mean?
Well, so I mean, in one part, you are laying tiles on a map, and then you're also
Sure.
playing a tableau of cards.
Sure. I would argue. Okay.
No, go ahead. Try to argue. I'll wait.
The tile laying is different because these are polyomino hexes.
Sure, but I mean, you're still laying tiles.
And it's
I
not-
mean,
yeah,
I'm
sure.
not saying it's a
Sure.
one-to-one comparison.
Okay,
I'm saying
sure.
that there's a lot of similarities to it.
Okay, that's fair.
It's called a segue, Kara. Ark Nova is a great game.
It really is.
You are doing a lot to it. You are managing your own personal map of polyomino tiles that you are laying out there to build enclosures, to then play animal cards to fill those enclosures.
Which is the best part.
It is the best part. And the idea is that you're trying to build the best zoo possible. But it gets more dense and there's a lot more layers to it because it's not just laying something out, playing a card, filling that. You also have a lot that you need to manage.
Yeah.
You have to manage conservation projects because at the end of the game, not only are you going to score based on how attractive your zoo is to outsiders, but you're also going to be judged by how many conservation projects you have done, what your conservation score is. And in fact, the final scoring is how many steps those are in outside of each other.
Right. So if you only go for points and totally ignore conservation, you're going to lose big time because the difference between those two tracks, they start at opposite ends of the board.
Right.
And they go in opposite directions. And so, you have to manage both of them in order to have any success.
Right. So there's a lot that you're managing in this game. You're managing those conservation projects. You're managing how attractive your zoo is, but then there's also tons of bonuses. Like you can have a zoo that specializes in primates. You can have a zoo that specializes in petting zoo animals or reptiles or birds. Don't make a zoo that's just birds. That sounds like a nightmare. But it's a lot of fun to kind of figure out where those things are and then start really specializing in those strategies. You also have different universities that you can partner with, other countries that you can base your animals exhibits on, and those all give you different bonuses or make cards cost less.
And there's levels of training that you sometimes to play an animal you have to have some sort of partnership in place. And so, you have a limited number of spaces that you can you can't get all of them.
Right.
And so, there will be animals that you can't play.
Right.
There will be like a continent that you cannot partner with. Just because that's part of the crunch is making the decision.
Yeah.
Just like you probably aren't going to be able to upgrade all of your cards.
Right. And that's the other aspect of this that makes this a very crunchy game is this has a really unique action selection system. Every turn you're going to do one of 5 actions. But depending on how long you've let that action cook, so how long it's been since the last time you took that action, it gets stronger each time.
Right.
Sometimes to play certain cards, you've got to have waited a long enough time for that action to get to the level 5 slot. Then you pull that, use it, and it's so much stronger than it would be if you had just used it. And so that's a huge part of the crunch in this game is you might know exactly what you want to do, but you're thinking to yourself, okay, it's going to take me not 2 turns to do this, but it's actually going to take me 4 because I've got to wait for this one to come back.
Well, and I will say as far as like action cards go, I think that this type of mechanism where you have that kind of delayed or the graduated system, whatever you call that, I really enjoy that.
It's great.
We have it. We have a couple of games that have this kind of play style, and I think it is incredibly intuitive. At least as people that play a lot of board games.
Sure.
I also think that specifically Ark Nova is maybe the coziest of the crunchy games on this list. I think just because of, the feel-good aspect of creating a zoo and, conserving. And I think that just the idea behind what you're doing, regardless of how crunchy the actions are, I think is really very cozy.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, you said that you think this might be the coziest game in our crunch list, but I've got one that might challenge that.
Ooh, okay.
So our next game, number 5, has an art style that I think is really cozy.
Number 6.
Are we going backwards?
10, 9, 8, 7, 6.
Neat.
Did you miss one?
I did miss one. That's okay. The order doesn't really matter too much. The segue was just perfect, Kara. So number 6. Adorable art style, very cozy, super crunchy game.
It really is very cute.
That's Root. So Root is one that the art style just screams adorable. You're basically playing woodland creatures. Mm-hmm. You're vying for woodland dominance. Mm-hmm. What makes this game super crunchy is that no factions play alike.
Oh my gosh, it's like you're playing different games.
It really is. The cats want to specialize in building like wood shops and doing all those types of things and making sure that they're progressing and building more and recruitment stands and all of that. The birds, they want to have, a special person in control, and that person that's in control has things that they have to fulfill. And so you get cards, and then every time you add one to the deck, you then have to do that many actions per turn. Mm-hmm. Then you've got the Woodland Alliance that it's basically just trying to start an uprising. They're the other forest creatures.
The insurrectionists.
Yeah, the insurrectionists. It's fine. And their strategy is totally different. I mean, they're looking at where there have been defeats, and they're trying to get people to spring back up from that. And then there's the Vagabond, which is just your arms dealer that's sneaking in between the forest clearings and selling anything to anybody that'll buy it.
And of course the Vagabond is a raccoon.
Right.
It's very cute. I noticed that you've only talked about the base game.
Yeah, so
there's so many more levels of crunch.
Yeah, they have released, I'm trying to remember, I think it's now 6 more factions, which we have all of them, and they all play vastly different.
They do.
It's kind of incredible, all the different ideas that they come up with. This game is really crunchy in that it's next to impossible to teach unless you have played every single faction.
Yeah, it's one that I would not recommend. I would not recommend playing Root with beginners.
Yeah.
Unless they're willing to watch a how-to play video or read the rulebook themselves.
Well, on their specific faction as well. I mean, the basic rules of the game aren't that complicated.
That's true.
Combat's pretty simple. What you do is fairly simple according to the sheet. It's just the strategy. Now, I will give the game a lot of credit. Everybody gets a player card, like a big baseboard of actions, and on the backside it has, hey, here's your guide to success. This is what you want to do early in the game. This is what you want to focus on.
I will say the first time I played Root, I really wished that I had a copy of that backside of the board that wasn't on the backside of my board.
So you didn't have to move everything, flip it. Yeah.
So that I could refer to it throughout the game. But, I think that the Root definitely belongs on the crunchy list.
Oh, yeah.
It is so complicated just because of the factions.
Yes.
We have several asynchronous games, and this is probably the most, at least, that we've played.
Definitely. A great tip, though, if you are interested in getting started and you don't mind spending a little bit more, the mobile app for this game is terrific. They have a great tutorial for every faction. Of course, it only comes with the base factions, and you can purchase the others. But if you're looking to get a quick start on how to learn this game, the app is fantastic for that.
Sure.
So yeah, that is number 6.
Root.
Number 5. Now we're back on track, right?
Yes.
Oh, goodness. These games not only get crunchier, but they also get heavier. Number 5 is Scythe. This is an economic Euro game masquerading as a war game.
Yeah, there's not really a lot of war in it.
No, in fact,
honestly,
you're actively discouraged from doing too much war.
Yeah, you want just a little bit.
So, as we talked about with Paladins, there's multiple scoring tracks on the game board of this. Not only are you tracking your economic victories, but you're also tracking your popularity.
Yeah.
If at the end of the game your popularity is low, you're losing a multiplier for your final score. And so it's really important that you're also keeping your people happy as you move about the board with your mechs and your leader and take control of various factories or other production spaces. Eventually, conflict does occur, and the conflict is actually pretty simple.
It is.
What you're going to do is you're going to wager your forces that you have, and so you are basically building up an economic deck of forces. That's one of those things that you're holding on to. And you basically say how much you're willing to lose. Whoever puts up the stronger number, they win, but you also lose any forces that you wagered.
Yeah, you lose them no matter what, whether you win or lose.
And so that's one that you might want to play conservatively, thinking that your opponent might wager lower or higher or whatever you need.
You have to really... It's a gamble, no matter
Sometimes
what.
there's a lot of strategy into losing a war, too.
That's true.
Because it moves you right back to your base.
Absolutely. I also think the turns in this are, at their core, it's pretty simple. I mean, you have your player... You have, like, a 2-part player board, one of which is, like, your faction board that kind of tells you what you specialize in, what you do, and then the other one has, 4 different actions.
Right.
And there are different types of those boards. Like, they're not all the same.
Right.
So this is where another one where that level of crunch, or it adds to the crunchiness that not everybody's actions are weighted the same.
Right.
But yeah, there's like 4 actions, and there's like a top and a bottom, and you can build things from it, and it definitely is. The turns are crunchy, but they're deceptively simple.
Right. It's again kind of like we were talking with Arc Nova. I mean, there's only a select number of things that you're going to do on your turn, so it doesn't seem like it's that bad. And truthfully, it's not. No. It's just figuring out when's the right time to do them.
Absolutely. This is one that I think Scythe is one that it's kind of right in our wheelhouse for playing. I think the pieces are very well designed. Also, it's got that like dual layer board, which is really nice for all the cubes that you're playing with. But yeah, it's again one that I find fairly intuitive as somebody that plays a lot of board games.
Yeah, I absolutely adore it. I think it's great, and it's got that right level of crunch. So number 5, Scythe. Okay, as I mentioned, the games keep getting heavier. This one is fairly new to us, and it was, in fact, new last year.
I really like this one a lot.
So Septima, almost a completely different theme.
It's I mean, this is kind of a standout in our crunchy games.
Yeah.
We don't really have it's kind of it's on the cozier side of theming. You think like witches and woodland vibes, although maybe not the trials. Ignore me.
No. When I think cozy, I think of a nice burning fire with someone at the stake right in the center. So in Septima, you're managing a coven of witches. Cozy, right?
That's the cozy part.
Yeah.
The witch trial is not.
The witch trial is not so cozy.
Yeah.
But as Kara was talking about, there's some fun to this. So you are moving your witch around the board. You're gathering up neat herbs and things to make potions because basically what you're doing is you're treating the townsfolk that have various diseases or inflictions, blindness or crippledness, and you're basically helping the town get better. But of course, everybody is afraid of witches,
right? And
so you've got to maintain anonymity, and you've got to keep away from witch hunters, which every round will come after you.
Yes.
What's really neat about this game is we talked about this system in place of like you only have so many actions. Septima is that same way. You only have so many actions, but if you match with another player, that action becomes stronger.
It does, but also more suspicious.
Yes, it becomes more suspicious, which means the witch hunters can move further in getting to you. You're managing a lot in this game. You're managing your position on the board. You're managing what actions you take, and you can talk with other people at the table about what actions to take. Then you're also managing the witches in your coven. So you've got, at the start of the game, you've got just 2 witches that start in your coven, and you can grow to more by influencing witch trials.
I think up to 4.
Yeah, you can have up to 4. And this is another thing that's really important because the more full your coven is, the higher your in-game multiplier is going to be. So you want to have a full coven. And that's really important because if the witch hunter catches your witch, one of your witches goes to trial.
Yeah.
Trial is exactly what it sounds as, in that you can spend actions to basically influence the trial and put one of your meeples in the jury selection, as it were. Those pieces go into a bag. That bag is shaped up, and then At the start of the trial, they take however many pieces they need for that. Whoever has the majority then gets that witch. If, however, the neutral townspeople win, then that witch is, the game says banished, but, I mean, like, let's be real, those witches are...
The card is removed from the game.
Yes, it is removed from the game, and it's out of your coven.
Yeah.
So there's a lot that's going on in this game, and there's also 2 different versions that are packed in here. So there's kind of the easier version, which they take out a lot of the trials and stuff.
Oh, interesting. Did we play the harder version?
Oh, yeah, of course we did.
Yeah.
So it kind of has like a base level of, okay, this is going to be a crunchy game. Here's your starter game.
Yeah.
I just said, nah, let's do it.
Yeah, I think that, like I was talking about with other games, with Septima, I think I lost track of the trials.
Yeah.
And I think that I lost this one pretty bad, I think.
You did not win, I know that.
Yeah. But that really hurt me because I think I ended the game with only 1 witch in my coven.
Yeah. That wasn't good.
Just because I think that for me, this game, like, the fun thing is collecting the things and building the potions and saving people, and having to also manage, like, running away and, like,
so you wanted to specialize in the cozy stuff.
I wanted it to be cozier than it is.
And yeah, unfortunately, running a witch coven is not as cozy as you would like it to be.
It's not. But I'm sure that there are other games that we could play where you're building potions that are cozy.
I'm sure that there are.
Quedlinburg. Cough, cough. Anyways.
Wow. Okay. So that is number 4, Septima.
Yes.
All right. Changing theme completely, and this one probably the lightest in terms of actual weight that we have.
It's a skinny box.
It really is. Look at this.
Yeah, it's very skinny.
It all fits in there.
Yeah.
The number 1 game on Board Game Geek still.
Really?
Brass Birmingham.
Wow.
I like Brass a lot.
It's a very fun game.
It is incredibly crunchy because it is one of the few games where I have felt the need to take the loan multiple times. In this game, what you're doing is you're building an empire of various resources. What's intriguing about it is that any player can use the resources that you create, whether it's beer or iron or coal or whatever else. And so there's kind of a mutual shared interest of that because when people take the resources off of your facilities,
you want people to use your spaces.
You're then going to sell that and increase how much money you make.
Absolutely.
After each turn, which is great because then you don't have to take out so many loans. What is also really neat about this game is that you play through a full round of 1 age, which is the canal age, and then
you like wipe the board. I mean, you calculate points,
and some of your facilities stay, but all of your connections that you made, those go off the board, and now you're dealing with railroads. Railroads cost more money to produce.
I mean, it feels like you're starting over.
It really does. And that's something that's so interesting because you're taking your resource board, which now everything is more expensive. And so those that have used up their resources in the first round are actually at an advantage because now they start with more money. The big thing on this game is, as much as you want to try to build as much on your player board as you can and place your tiles everywhere, you also really have to watch to make those connections.
It's true.
Because the end of the game scoring is based on how many connections you have to place
and how many points there are connected to those connections.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And so if you connect to some place like, say, Birmingham, that's going to score a lot of points the more that you're connected to it. But yeah, this is a great game. It's all about networking. There's a little bit of like mutual cooperation to get some of those resources out.
I mean, especially I think as you get towards the end of the rounds, some of the resources become a little more scarce. I think specifically towards the end of the second age, finding enough beer becomes kind of hard. And it's not like with coal or is the orange one iron?
Yes.
It's not like with coal or iron where you can buy those from a bank if there isn't any on the board, as long as you're like connected to one of those places. There has to actually be a beer token somewhere on the board.
Right.
And so, you know, making sure that you're encouraging the other people, oh yeah, you should totally build a brewery there. Just in time for me to use that beer. I mean, there's definitely some of that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Number 3, Brass Birmingham.
Great choice.
All
Love
right.
this game.
Number 2, I think of this game more as a system. And so that is Gloomhaven.
Well,
I'm showing Jaws of the Lion here, which is a more compact, more streamlined version of that, mostly because our current box of Gloomhaven weighs about 25 pounds.
yeah, we've got the wooden organizers, so
Right.
the box is
It's very heavy. It's a workout just to get it off the top of the shelf.
right.
Gloomhaven, Jaws of the Lion, very similar in a lot of ways. Similar card playing mechanisms, similar leveling up system. But what's nice about this game is there's not really map tiles. You're doing everything out of the book. So Gloomhaven as a whole, as a system, is just really, really dense.
It is.
There's a lot that's going on. The actual gameplay, I think, is rather elegant.
It is. I mean, and it's pretty simple. You know, you pick 2 of your cards. You play the top of one and the bottom of the other.
In any order that you choose.
In any order that you choose. The card that you choose also determines your initiative order and the order that everybody plays in. And that, I mean, that's the gist.
Right. But, I mean, as simple as that sounds, you're also managing your position on the map in accordance with enemies. You're figuring out, like, what attacks are going to hit them, what weaknesses they might have, what status effects you can inflict.
And you have the modifier deck,
Yep.
which determines your success or how... potentially, or how much damage you do.
Right. And then there's also, if you're playing with other people, you're thinking about what they're going to do, because the reality is you're not supposed to talk to each other about what you're doing.
It's true.
It can get very difficult. The game itself is pretty tough. And then on top of that, as you play, you level up, you get new cards, and you have a decision on which of the new level up cards you want to take with you. And then as you go into each different encounter, you have to decide which cards you want to take, because you've got a hand limit. So there's a lot of just small decisions that go into this game. And, you know, that's just when you're controlling your own characters.
Right.
I think the added level of complexity that might turn some people off to a game like this is that you also have to play the dungeon master.
It's true. And, it, you know, it's one where one person can do the majority of it, but it's kind of a group. You know, we're bouncing it off of each other, like, oh, how do the bad guy, which way do they move? Is it closest person? Is it, you know, like, you're constantly like rule checking each other, just because there is so much to manage that, you know, it's possible that you're forgetting something that somebody else is remembering.
It is one that I would say, because it's a campaign game and you're going to be playing it a lot of that stuff becomes second nature. So
it does.
It sounds very dense at first, but it does
easier.
start to flow. But if you just get this game, and I'm looking at Gloomhaven as a you know, total package, which would include Gloomhaven, Jaws of the Lion, and Frosthaven. I know Frosthaven came with like a 100-page rule book.
Yeah.
That's very daunting for brand new players. But
absolutely,
if you're willing to give it a chance and you're willing to kind of take that time to learn it, there is something incredibly rewarding about playing through these campaigns.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love it. Number 2, Gloomhaven, the whole system.
Good
All
choice.
Right. So number 1 is a game that I really like a lot, that we don't get to play very often.
In fact, I think we've only played it once.
Twilight Imperium.
There's like barely enough room for us to...
That's why we have to look over the game we're in. Twilight Imperium is a game that you've got to clear a full day for.
Like an actual full day.
When I was young, I had my parents that had a group of friends that they would play Risk. And it was one that they would, like, you know, everybody would get together as a group, and like the adults would be in the room playing Risk, and the kids would be running around the backyard doing all sorts of things. But they would be playing it all day. This is that, except good.
Tell me more about how you feel about Risk.
Risk is a bad game. Twilight Imperium, though, is a great game. You've got so many different factions that have asymmetrical powers, abilities,
so much going on.
resources.
Yeah.
The map itself is modular, so it's a different game board each time.
It's beautiful, though.
It is. It's a gorgeous looking game. You're doing a lot in this, so you're not just necessarily doing combat, although combat definitely happens, and it can be a little bit like Risk, where you're just rolling dice for a while if you've got a big armada. But there's incentive to not fight a lot of times in this and build alliances with people.
Right. I mean, the political maneuvering that happens in Twilight Imperium is sometimes more important than the war and the battles.
Well, and this is one that whenever I see movies and they're like doing war strategy at the war table and they're like moving pieces with the small shovels, this is what I'm imagining that they're actually doing. You know, it's like you're moving your dreadnought over here, and you're going to get these resources, and you're going to get this influence.
Just all playing Twilight Imperium.
I mean, I think the world would be a better place if that's what we did instead of wars.
Sure. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, this is a game that it's worth the time commitment because there's so much to it, and it's incredibly dense in that regard. I mean, you're managing promissory notes. You are influencing votes to get things to spin your way. You're going into battle with other players to get planets so you can get more votes, so you can get more resources, so you can build more ships, so you can take over more stuff. So you eventually, your faction can be the guardian of the center planet called Mektal Rex. This board game is just like a world I would love to explore in other media like video games, movies, comics, I mean, all sorts of things.
Yeah. I mean, is there a Twilight Imperium video game or anything?
Nope.
No?
Not to my knowledge. And what I love about this game is the stories that it's going to tell.
Sure.
Because, you know, you can have these different factions that and these unholy alliances that get made somehow at the table of just like, oh, remember that time that we did this and then you guys paired up and then everybody turned on the red player and it's just a fascinating game. Now, I also understand that if you're playing a game for like 5 hours and then everybody turns against you, that's going to feel not fun.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that's part of the story in some regards.
Sure. Well, and you know, you have to think that I would have to wonder what led to everybody turning on you. Were you being a big jerk?
Sometimes you gotta eliminate the space bully, Kara.
That's true.
But I could only scratch the surface of explaining this game in a short video. The big thing is, if you are looking for something crunchy, you are looking to get into something that's going to have a lot of variety, a lot of different choices, and you want something meaty.
A lot of replayability, too, with the variety of factions and, like you said, the modular board.
Right. I think this is one of the best bangs for your buck you can get, especially if you have a gaming group that's also into those big time decisions. So yeah, my number one crunchy game, Twilight Imperium. All right, Kara. That's our top 10 crunchy games according to me, but what about you? What are you surprised is not on the list?
So, one that I'm a little surprised isn't on there is Rococo.
Sure.
It's one that there is also a lot going on. The workers are very specialized managing that hand. The store is incredibly difficult to manage as well. The resources are difficult. The placement, I mean, there's a lot happening on that board.
I definitely thought a lot about Rococo in making this list. I kind of put it up there with Great Western Trail, which I felt like Great Western Trail edged it out just a little bit because of the card deck management that you were doing as well.
Sure. Yeah. You know, I'm not sure. We have a lot of crunchy games too. You know, just like we have a lot of cozy games, we've got a lot of crunch.
Turns out we have a lot of games, Kara.
Well, yes, that's also true. Yeah. So I think that your crunchy picks are great. They're definitely crunchy.
Well, we want to know and we want to hear from you. What's the crunchiest game in your collection? Based on the 10 games that I gave you here today, is there a crunchy game from our collection that we are missing? What's one that we should be talking about? Leave us a comment, and if you haven't already, be sure to like and subscribe so you can be aware of when our next list drops. This has been Crunchy Cozy Games. Thanks so much for stopping by.
Bye.
Bye-bye.